Google. Let's go get them again.
Welcome back to the Robezoid channel. I'm your host, Mark, and welcome to Sampling Samples. Today we are sampling from the brand of Amouage. The scent is named Boundless. We have an official little sample. This one is part of the Odyssey collection of the brand. Boundless is actually housed in the men's bottle. It is marketed as Unisex. I think that might be one of the first for the brand. I do see that they utilize the rainbow eucalyptus tree as the packaging idea, so that's what you see here. Amouage is a brand that I have such high regard. I don't know if I want to talk past tense, like had such a high regard, because the Chong era was the era that I kind of fell in love with niche perfumery. And what I expect from the brand of Amouage is pretty much higher than a lot of these other niche brands. Like Amouage is above and beyond of a Xerjoff or PDM or Nishio or all the brands that are being pushed today. So the Chong era, I expect unique, daring scents and genius-like builds within the brand. That's what I expect. The new creative direction is going, dare I say, more mainstream these days. And many purists, and maybe you'll put me in that little area, don't want to see this. We honestly want to keep things the way they were. It's a tough pill to swallow when sniffing new Amouage releases, as we kind of felt that the brand was one of the pinnacles of niche perfumery. Honestly, for me, every time a new Amouage man release came out, it was a absolute blind buy. It didn't really matter. I started with Jubilation 25, so I started late. Like there was gold, silver, etc., etc. Juby was my first one, and I went from that to Epic, to Memoir, Honor, and the list goes on. I was blind buying them as soon as they came out. Now I am having a hard time even catching up to what they're actually creating and throwing out there to the world, even in the sampling world here. So Boundless is a few years old. This release here, and I'll be honest with this testing, it had me in an emotional feel, because first sniffing it, I felt it was a little mainstream, like right away. Not the ideology of the past of the brand, where they were more trendsetters, they were more unique, they wouldn't follow trends. This felt like it was piggybacking on a certain trend that is still going to this day. That's where a lot of niche brands are kind of going, like they're copying each other. And that's where Amouage was kind of away from that and kind of special in that realm, is that they weren't doing that. But the more I wore Boundless, the more I felt this is almost like a crossover. And I'm going to use, like, I don't know, some weird thought process here, but kind of like when you're an SUV guy, you like trucks, you hate cars, and then the crossover came in. And this is the perfect example, because the crossover was a car and a truck at the same time, kind of. The truck purist would be like, no, that's not a truck. You know, the truck purist would say, that's ugly. But it had a little bit of both, and Boundless has that. It's a little mainstream with a little Amouage magic in it. So my tune kind of changed throughout this, even throughout just this one sample, which is kind of rare, honestly. Usually I know what I'm getting myself into. You know, I might get surprised off first sniff, but usually I'm on the, okay, this is what it is on the first wearing. And then there's not much that changes from 2 to 3 wearings or 4 wearings. These official samples were actually much bigger than my usual lucky scent that I usually get with these. I don't know how big this was. Does it say? I don't think you really care. But this thing was full. So they didn't cheap out. So I had a lot of wearings with Boundless. So let's delve into it. Now let's go under the hood. Let's take a look at some stats on this one. Release date was back in 2021, so it has some years behind it now. Nose, Cadin, Vinchon, Spanner, she penned Memoir Man, Overture, Myths, Fate, among others. It is a perfumier that I respect, that I love, kind of underrated, honestly. You know, a lot of people talk about other perfumiers, all-star perfumiers, De Chauffour, Francis K, to, you know, there's tons of them that are Maurice, among others. So she's not in that realm of talks, but resume's pretty impressive, and Christopher Chong utilized her a few times within his days in Amouage, which is kind of rare. And you're looking at those names, and there is some really good fragrances under her name here. So Kerin has done some great stuff. Now, let's take a look at the notes as far as the major notes to my nose. We got vanilla and tobacco. This is what this thing is known for. However, they're not pillars like, at least I feel they're not pillars like other vanilla and tobacco-based fragrances. And I'm going to speak to that. But incense is the third wheel in here. But just saying those three notes, with a lot of Amouages, it doesn't say much to paint a picture of this particular release. So let's delve into it. It is my scent of the day today, but I still have a little bit left of my little sample, which was a fairly big sample actually. And I did spray, that's my launching. This is my strip that I was testing at the same time while I was writing my brief for this. And Boundless starts us off with complexity, as an Amouage fragrance should do. Now, it's the star of the show in regards to, if you're looking at the back end of this fragrance to the front end. I absolutely prefer the front end of this fragrance. It's ambery, it has pipe tobacco, it has spices, a good amount of spices. Actually, the spices kind of steal the show in Boundless, and I'm going to get into that, especially in this opening to the mid. Boundless gives you a zip of invigorating notes like ginger and blood orange. The ginger's top notch here and is a huge star in Boundless, with the blood orange playing peekaboo with your nose. I mean, it really is, you know, here I am, front and center. You can smell the blood orange. You're not going to miss it. And then boom, she's gone. It shows up and it leaves just as quickly as you found it. These citruses never really took over the scent, but they're there in the mishmash of spices and darkness. So ginger, absolutely beautiful in this fragrance. Some of the best use of it. Blood orange, very short-lived, but well done and really great representation of that note. Now the spices in here, and the spices are a thing to wonder here, as the ginger is the star, but cardamom and something like cloves or cinnamon here that really warms this thing up. Sneaking in somewhere is there's kind of like a cumin-like vibe in this fragrance. It gives you a little shot in the arm, and it has that little funk to it. So noses be warned. And it's well hidden, but is an Easter egg of a note that I love to gravitate towards. And some noses may miss it altogether, but for me, I can smell it. The spices are absolutely exactly what I would come to expect from an Amouage. Not as vivid or as 3D as a lot of others that really render the spice and the volume probably amped up. The volume in this, as far as the spices go, not amped up, very well blended. But they're a big portion of the fragrance. It's just that the volume isn't that high. So yeah, this spice here is part of the charm in Boundless, because I do need that spicy kick, and Kerin delivered in that regard. The pipe tobacco, the incense are underlying notes here in the opening and are always present. They will amplify and turn themselves down during the life of the fragrance, but as this is dubbed a tobacco vanilla based fragrance, you sometimes kind of forget the tobacco piece of this particular fragrance at times for me. And I don't know if that's the magic in this fragrance, that there's a lot of moving parts and that's what Amouage is done for. But you know, this opening has a lot of things going on that you almost forget that it's a tobacco vanilla based fragrance. Now the resins in here, another thing of magic here, will be a little more prominent in the back end. We're going to talk more about that later on in this review, but I wanted to mention it in the opening. First, the LME in here has a large role in the opening with its resinous lemony flavor. So you are going to get a little bit of that citrus, very little, but the LME does play its role here. Now the myrrh and the benzoin also play a large role here. And they're both resinous and balmy, but I feel both notes can give out a cola vibe. They both did in the past throughout my testing in particular fragrances, but in here they do that. The myrrh gives a cherry cola vibe in certain fragrances, and it does here. I do feel a little bit of cherry cola, kind of Dr. Pepperish kind of feel, and it shows itself. And I kind of compare it to the Creation E Cola boozy note from Roja Dove, which I have. It almost also kind of felt, and I'm not talking about the resins here, but this opening, some parts of it kind of felt a little bit like Burberry London. And I'm sure that that's a big no-no, reviewing an Amouage and kind of throwing out some cheap designer fragrance. But again, it's just a portion of the scent, but I felt like the spicy parts, the tobacco, it had the same cozy, warm vibe. Burberry London has that port wine. And it really had that little piece that Burberry London kind of felt to me personally, versus a Creation E, which also gives out that cola vibe. So very interesting, a lot going on in this opening. It's complex, it's simply outstanding. There is some really good parts in this opening, just what I expect from an Amouage. Now the dry down, on the other hand, is where I had some issues. Now some reviewers compare this to a Parfum the Marley type of backhand, and I'm really close to co-signing you here. There's some complexity I found on some of the later wearing this fragrance, but I had that initial shock in the opening, or my first wearing of this in the dry down. What I wrote in my notes was basically this: ambery, tobacco, smoky backbone. That's it. Very quiet note for an Amouage testing. I was like, what do I think about it? And we're gonna get into more of the complexities. Let's get into those. So we'll say my lack of notes for an Amouage fragrance's dry down on the first wearing was kind of scary. That's not an Amouage type of note for me. I'm busy on my computer writing different nuances, especially in the first wearing, kind of things that I feel that I'm sensing. I try to co-sign myself with wearing 2 and 3 and say, yes, that's exactly what I'm wearing. So I gave myself the duty on wearing 2 and 3 of this one to really focus on the dry down. Maybe I was distracted. Maybe I wasn't getting the full picture. That happens. You know, every fragrance reviewer has one bad day. Is it an amber woody thing? Yeah, it is. But let's see what else I get. Now the woods here feel like cedar. Little Home Depot scent profile, never hurt anybody. So there's some cedar in here. The vanilla in this is almost waxy. The vanilla in here is not playful. It's an almost waxy quality in the back end. Almost like there's a certain floral in here, kind of nudging that vanilla note, which is quite interesting. I never really got the culprit of what makes this thing kind of waxy a little bit, but it is a unique take. So the vanilla never goes too cupcakey or fake. It was just enough. It almost had like an airy quality to it. And pairing that with a chocolatey patchouli. So there's a cacao note in the note breakdown that's listed. And yeah, it's a chocolatey patchouli that comes out. And also, I almost forgot to mention, and which is a huge note in this release, is the Gaiac wood, which seems to be the culprit of the smoky quality here, with resins and a rooty, dry papyrus note. Some of the spices kind of spill down to the dry down of the scent, and some of them you lose. You definitely lost all the citruses and the brightness in the back end of this. There's quite a bit of accords and notes that distract you away from this whole tobacco vanilla theme that people want to put this fragrance in that certain box. As far as Amouage go, there's a lot of Amouage quality in here, obviously based on Cadin's art. I really felt like the tobacco was on a slow crawl to show itself, and same with the vanilla. It really didn't feel Like I did feel some sweetness up top, don't get me wrong, but there's a resinous quality to it and there's a cola quality to it. So it never really felt like vanilla until things started to kind of go away a little bit. And then you're like, ah, there it is. The intro was really about the thinner notes and the spices as the stars here. And then in the back end, it's more about the cocoa, the gaiac, among other notes that kind of distract you from the vanilla and the tobacco note to keep you entertained. So there is some entertainment value out of this release. So overall, Boundless really is the crossover Amouage that I mentioned that still shows the beauty of Kennan's penmanship, which we all know she can be one of the best with the right creative direction, and blends that with a mainstream appeal of an old idea of tobacco and vanilla. Is this overly challenging as an Amouage? No. Unless cumin attacks your nose in the forefront, like it did with me, but I enjoy that kind of spice. I just want to forewarn you. You may miss it altogether, but if you get hit with it, you may not like it. That's probably the only real daring thing I would say in this release. Can it remind you of other scents? Sure, it does, which is the least Amouage thing to really say. It definitely, you know, other brands, you do that. Xerjoff, you're like, oh, this reminds me of something. You know, PDM, oh, this Clone House, it reminds me of something. There's not too many times that I can't even see one or two times that I felt like, oh, Amouage is piggybacking on something during the Christopher Chong era. So it's the least Amouage thing to ever say, can it remind me of other scents in the past? And yes, it can. Lots of times with Amouage scents, I tend to appreciate the overall idea and then go deep into it to pinpoint all those little nuances that make me excited about Amouage fragrances. That's why I don't get bored of them, is because I discover and I find new things. The blending, certain little notes that just come out on certain wearings, things like that. Here, it felt the other way around. You know how, you know, I get the whole idea of the old Amouages and then kind of get excited about all the little ones. And you're just like, oh, okay, yeah. This one felt a little flipped. The little nuances excited me out of this one off the bat in the opening. And then the back end kind of distracted me as being simple. So it kind of did like a 180 on me in regards to Amouage as a brand. Overall, I think it's a good crossover scent for people that are just getting into Amouage scents and may want to discover the older pieces of the line. This is probably a good place to start. It will show you the glimpse and a little peekaboo of the magic of the older Amouages, while keeping true and being basically in a safe place, if that makes sense. You know, you're not going to try out Figment or Myths or Memoir or Interlude right off the, well, you can, but I feel like this would kind of ease you into the brand of Amouage, and I think this would be a good start of that crossover of unique ideas and discovery, and then kind of go backwards from Boundless. I think this would be a great starter. Now let's get into Seasons, Day, Night, Versatility, and Performance. Seasons, I feel like this is a fall-winter based fragrance. You can kind of, you know, push it a little bit into the spring, especially depending on the climate that you have. Like for me in Canada, you know, there's still snow on the ground and the sun is shining in the spring. You can wear something like this to kind of extend the life of it. Day or night, I feel like this is more of a nighttime scent. Versatility, average for an Amouage. A lot of them, you know, you have your restrictions depending on who you are, but fairly average. It's a fairly safe scent to wear. But yeah, average as far as versatility, which is actually a pretty good score, especially if you're looking at the older Amouages. Performance. The performance is not beast. You know, everybody likes to tag Amouage in beast mode. No, this one right here, you're getting good 7 to 10 hours as far as longevity goes. Very good. Exactly what I'm looking for as far as performance goes. You know, if you give me a little bit more for darker scents, perfect. If not, it's okay. Projections, fairly average. This thing did not throw itself off my skin as much as I kind of wanted to. So fairly average, fairly good performance. I have no issues with it. Could I have got more? Yeah. but at this time, performance, pretty good. So my final thoughts on Boundless. One last sniff before I finish this one off. Okay, final thoughts. Well, at times I may be a little too hard on Renault and the team, the current team at Amouage, because Mr. Chong's era it's long gone now, and it's time to let go, but let's not forget, right? And it's sometimes when you're looking and you're seeing this logo, you're just like, okay, you know, you're kind of stuck in the past and kind of, you're like the old man on the lawn and telling the kids, get off my lawn. That's sometimes how I feel with the brand of Amouage. It was something that, you know, I was one of the first to review Jubilation and many of the Amouages that maybe some of you don't even know. You know, first one with Interlude, first one with Memoir. I started that stuff. Jubilation, guess who started that? You know, 40-minute, what was it, 37-minute fragrance review. Jeez. So Amouage is ingrained in me. It is part of my fragrance culture. Jubilation showed me how a niche fragrance can be built. So there's a lot of emotion behind it that maybe the new team at Amouage doesn't understand. These social media stars, right? They're giving out free bottles to certain people that don't even know how to really attach themselves to a fragrance and a brand themselves. There's a lot more than just free bottle, 10 out of 10, sexy. No. So at the end of the day, the tricks of the old are still around in this release. We have that blood orange peeking through to the amazing rolls of the spices. And let's not forget the resins in here with the cola vibe up top. It might not be enough to sell to a purist within our fragrance community. And maybe it is too mainstream, maybe. There's a bit of cat-in magic in Boundless that I kind of discovered with my actually pretty big sample from Amouage here. But there's also quite a bit of safeness in here. And overall, for me, still good enough for a bottle. It's bottle worthy. And as you can see right there, she's there. So I got this bottle after I started actually testing this thing out for review. So I decided to just finish my review on this, and then we'll do an unboxing later on this once I feel the need to unbox, which will probably come in a couple weeks or so. But yeah, I really enjoyed this sampling. Samples, is it a star? And that's where I go, you know, I'm gonna give it a score, even though I know I have a bottle and I'm gonna unbox it. Usually I don't, you know, I don't do that, but I'm gonna give it a score because it is a sampling samples. And sampling samples, you need to give a score out of 10. And it'll be kind of fun for me to revisit it once I've unboxed this and kind of worked my fragrance review, you know, and then years later, I'll look at this video and go, oh, I gave it this. Maybe I gave it a little too low or too high of a score. Boundless. And I think Amouage lately, you know, I'm trying to remember, but I think I've been giving out some pretty good scores. There was Black Iris and Interlude 53, which got perfect 10s, if I recall correctly. This is not on that level. I am going to give Boundless a 8 out of 10, which is a fairly low score for an Amouage. I feel like there is a lot of, I feel like I was fair with the rating, but I feel like there's a lot of that back end doesn't have enough magic around it. And I don't mind this amberwood. There's some fragrance reviewers absolutely hate it. I don't mind an amberwood. And there was little things like papyrus and certain things as the spices ran through. The Gaiac wood with its smoky feeling that really did kept me entertained. So there is some goodness in this back end, but I think as far as a whole, 8 out of 10 is pretty good score for this one. And you never know, it kind of gives room for it to, with the bottle here, within months and years to move up or move down. But I don't think it's ever going to hit 10. The highest I think this is going to hit with me is a 9. It may go down to a 7, but I don't think it's going to go further than that. I don't think it's going to go to a 6 or a 5. But maybe the 8 was actually the perfect score for this thing, honestly. So 8 bottles out of 10 for Boundless. Now that you heard my take, I'd love to see yours in the comments below. If you got nothing to add in regards to Boundless, I do want to start delving into the woman Amouage. And I know a lot of people are probably going to call me kind of certain names, but I've never smelt, I've never actually, I don't think I've ever went in a store and sniffed the Amouage line. I don't think I've ever, no, I don't think I've ever done that. So I've never smelt any of the woman counterparts. I do have a couple samples, but I'm thinking of getting a few samples of the woman line. So hit me up in the comments below. Let me know some of the best in the women's line that are toting the line of Unisex. Even the old stuff, discontinued stuff, don't care. This nose can find some discontinued, hard to find fragrances too. So as always, a great report fragrance will make a lasting impression. Choose your scent wisely. Thanks for watching, YouTube. Have a good one.